Mary Ellen Carsley is a scientific and botanical illustrator, as well as an art educator. A former practicing architect, she has illustrated 8 books and numerous articles for national and international journals. We're excited to have her with us today to learn the basics of botanical drawing and keeping a sketchbook with spring flowers. So with that, please welcome Mary Ellen. Woohoo!
Thank you so much, Libby, and welcome everybody to my studio. For those of you who have been with me before and in a class before, thank you so much for returning. And for those of you who are new, I hope this is the first of many classes. So I want to, first of all, reassure you that if you have no drawing experience, you need not be concerned. This is a completely designed for beginners, and I'm assuming no drawing knowledge and no drawing experience. So if this is the first time in years that you've picked up pencil and paper and want to draw, be assured this is the class for you. For those of you who have a little more experience, I hope this provides an opportunity for some review and also a chance to just get back to the basics. Like all musicians, sometimes you have to do your scales to get more expertise in what you're already doing. So I hope there's something for everyone today. So one of the things that I love to start out with is to ask yourself, well, why draw? And of course, drawing is relaxing, but one of the things that I love to bring up to mention is that drawing is a way of really broadening your perspective in seeing the world in more detail, as well as more subtlety and the subtle beauty that is around us every single day. We live life pretty quickly and we're often multitasking. Drawing doesn't allow you to multitask. It doesn't allow you to live life at that breakneck pace. It slows you down and it really helps bring some enrichment and enjoyment to your life. So even if you're not happy with your skills, keep drawing. Because it not only is it good for your brain and for your hands, but it's also good for your spirit. So let's begin at the beginning. I'm going to switch my camera down, and it might take a moment for my camera from time to time, to focus. Don't worry, that's not a technical problem on your end. It's just the internet catching up with us. And I want to make sure that you're going to be able to see everything. So we're going to start right at the beginning with our basic materials here. All right, so I'm going to switch my camera here. Going to get us focused. Libby, am I good? I want to make sure everybody can see.
I think so. If you can the items are a little bit, so it's a top, there you go. If you can sort of move the camera up towards the torso. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, so let's start. So now, throughout the course, you're going to notice that occasionally you're going to see a brand name or something like that. I am not advocating any particular brand, nor am I paid to sponsor any particular brands. These just happen to be the pencils and the erasers and other materials that work for me. So it's not any kind of endorsement. What's important is that I want to encourage everyone to buy good quality materials and to experiment. And by good quality materials, I mean you really want to avoid using any kind of grade school brand. You really want to get either art student grade or artist grade materials. The reason why I say that is because you don't want to have to struggle with the materials, with your medium. If the mediums are not of a good quality, it's always going to be working against you a little bit, and you're going to have to fuss with it. And I don't want you to have that frustration right from the beginning. So you don't have to spend a lot of money, but I would recommend that you go more middle of the road rather than elementary grade school kind of materials that you could find sort of on the fly in any of the big box stores and things like that. So I recommend going to an art supply store or going to an art supplier and getting the materials that you need. Now, what we're going to be starting with today are some pencils, and pencils, one of the most common everyday art media that we have here. And one of the things that you're going to notice about a pencil is that you may not have noticed this before, but pencils have a certain designation on them. And typically it's at the very tip of the pen or very back end of the pencil here. And that is, it's going to say that it's a 2H. This one you can see that it says 2H on it there. I'm going to move it up a little closer to the camera. Hopefully and then this one has a little better contrast. This one you can see that it's a 2B, and the one here is an H. Now, what does that mean? Well, pencils are composed of a wooden shaft, and inside, embedded in that wooden shaft, is a tube that is composed of graphite and a clay and binder. So there's actually 3 ingredients in a pencil. And when you're looking at that, and when you're looking at that grade or that designation on the back of the pencil, that is telling you how hard the pencil is. So what that means is it's telling you how much graphite per clay and binder, what those ratios are. So the softer the pencil, the more graphite it has compared to the binder and the clay. The harder the pencil, the less graphite it has compared to the binder and the clay. So this is important as an artist to understand, because that will tell us how dark and how light we'll be able to draw with that pencil. Now, most of us are familiar with the school grade pencil. That's our 2H pencil. And if you've taken a standardized test ever, they tell you you must use a 2H pencil. That's because that the digital eye that reads those dots on anything that you fill in on a standardized test is programmed to read a certain level of darkness. And so that's why they're very specific about which pencil that you're going to use. So today what we're going to be focusing on is using some B pencils. They're very nice and soft, and you'll see the difference between an H and a B as I progress. So I'm going to set the pencils aside for a moment. And then other materials that we have here is, I'm very big on having a standard pencil sharpener, just one that you can put in your pocket. One of the nice things about pencils is that when you sharpen your pencil, it's completely biodegradable. So if you're outside and you just make a little shallow hole and your shaving can go right into the ground, and you don't need to be feeling guilty about dirtying the environment or anything like that. And you can sharpen your pencil. You'll notice that this pencil sharpener has 2 barrel sizes, 2 diameters here. This one's the standard size, and this one is for larger pencils that are either pastel pencils or other kinds of art pencils. It's nice to have those handy. So, and I like this because if I lose it, it was all of $1 and I don't need to worry about it. So there's our pencil sharpener. The next one that we have always are the erasers. And one would think, well, I know what an eraser is, but there's several different kinds that I like to draw to, especially the attention of beginners. So the first one is the one that we're probably the most familiar with, which is the pink eraser. When you use the pink eraser, I want you to think of this as a complete eradicator. This is when you want to remove something from the drawing completely. You do not want any remnant of it whatsoever. So this is a much more abrasive. You can even feel it when you compare it to feeling like the soft white plastic eraser. So you can actually feel the sort of grittiness in the pencil itself. Very handy to have this. One thing I want to advise you to do is when you have this pink eraser, before you use it, always have a piece of scrap paper handy so that you can clean the pencil, clean the eraser before you go on to your drawing, so you don't make a big nasty smudge onto the drawing, because sometimes the graphite sits on top of this and you want to remove it before you go and try to eradicate anything from your drawing. The next kind of eraser that you want to have in your artist toolkit is what's called a plastic eraser or a white eraser. These are typically, for those of you who remember the days of hand drafting, these are very, very common. The thing that's very nice about this eraser is that it is a very, very gentle eraser. It will completely eradicate and I like showing them to you, this is what it looks like pretty much new. This is what it starts looking like after I use it and I begin to cut the shape of it. And then you can see, again, this is what the white eraser, plastic eraser looks like new. It's going to come wrapped up like almost like a piece of candy. And then this is what it starts looking like after you've used it for a while. Again, as with all erasers, you want to have a piece of scrap paper handy. And so before you use it, that you clean off the area that you're going to use so you don't go and create any nasty smudges from dirty parts of the eraser on your drawing. You can see how that just happened there. Now, this is a much, much more gentle eraser than the pink eraser. It has less grit in it, so it's not as abrasive on the surface of the paper. Now, the paper often has what's called a tooth or a texture to it. You can see I have two different tooths here. This one is a very, very smooth paper. It's a hot press paper, which means when the paper was made, it actually went through hot rollers to take any kind of texture out of it. So it has a very, very smooth texture to it. This one is a slightly rougher texture. It's what's called a cold press. And the cold press has a little bit of, just some hills and valleys in it, just a little bit of tooth to it. And that can be very, very handy, because if I'm painting something or drawing something that has a little bit of texture on it, then the paper can actually enhance my drawing. So it depends on what you want to use. For now, when you're beginning, most drawing paper is usually a cold press paper, has a little bit of tooth, little hills and valleys to it, and that gives you a lovely sketch effect. So I would focus on having that right now, rather than going to the hot press paper, which is a much smoother paper and sometimes can be a little bit fussy. Either way, when you're going to be doing maybe some significant erasing but not complete eradicating, and especially if you're going to draw in an area again, you want to use the plastic eraser. The reason why you want to use this is because it is much gentler on the tooth, and you will not get a rough spot that might show up in your drawing later on. So that's why the plastic eraser, or the white eraser. The next and last eraser that we have is the one that is always really fun, and I like to show this to you because this is how it comes. You wouldn't recognize it once you start using it, but this is called a gummy eraser or a kneaded eraser. Looks like a piece of gray gum, and again comes wrapped up like a piece of candy. All of these erasers are very inexpensive. Typically, they are $1. Less than $2. But once you start working with the gum eraser or the kneaded eraser, it's just that you can knead it in your hands. And what I like to do, I often draw with it sort of tucked into, and this is only if you're comfortable with this, but I like to draw with it tucked into sort of the palm of my hand while I'm drawing. It keeps it warm and it's easy to use. Now, this is a very, very gentle eraser. And what we use this for is for sort of cleaning up different areas. You'll see me use it like that, just sort of edge cleaning. And then also for pulling out highlights. You'll notice that you can manipulate the shape of it, which is the great value of this eraser. And that way I can pull out different highlights. So we'll set the erasers aside now. The last but not least is the tortillon, or the stump. Now these are just simple rolls of paper. They come in a lot of sizes and varieties, and this is for doing actual blending. I want to encourage you to use these to blend rather than your fingers. Your fingers have natural oils on them, and those natural oils can begin to mix with the graphite and the clay and the binder on your paper, and it can make it sort of a sticky mess and make it very, very hard to manipulate. So it's best to keep your hands, your fingertips off of your drawing as much as possible, and let the tortillons or the stumps do the work. Typically you use the tip of it. However, if you're using a larger area and you're trying to blend a larger area, you can feel free to use the back part to get a broader surface. Now, these are, again, very, very inexpensive. One of the other things I like to keep around is a little sand block. So if it's very dirty, I can actually clean it. Sand block is handy for cleaning my tortillons and stumps, but it's also very handy for shaping the edge of my pencil if I like to draw with a more chiseled tip. And again, this is going to be a chance for you to sort of experiment and explore yourself, or if I like to, or if I want to just knock off that really, really just fragile tip that sometimes emerges after you sharpen your pencil, and you just kind of knock that off to get a more rounded end on the tip of your pencil. It's handy to have a little sand block around. Now, this is an artist sand block. I got this at an art supply store. You don't need to buy this. You can go to a hardware store, buy paint sticks and a pack of just very, very fine grade sandpaper, and cut it into strips and staple it to the paint stick. And you can probably make about 10 of these for the cost of what this was when I bought it in the art supply store. So there's a lot of, one of the things to always keep in mind when you're looking at your medium and your materials is there a less expensive way of making that? It's very, very easy. Art supply stores are kind of like candy shops or bakeries. You want to try to taste everything, but you don't necessarily have to buy the most expensive thing if there's a more practical and economical use. Another handy thing that wasn't on, these two things were not on my list, but I just want to bring your attention to them. Some of you may recognize this, some of you may not. Those of you who've done hand drafting in the past would recognize this, or hand lettering. Calligraphers often use these. This is called an erasing shield, and you'll notice it's a very, very thin piece of metal. And what this is for is exactly that. If I want to erase just in a tiny area, I can do that with my eraser and protect the rest of the drawing around it. And again, this is a very, very inexpensive, drawing tool. You can find them typically for $1 or $2 in a drafting area or an art supply store or an online art supplier.
Mary Ellen, we've had a couple of questions about the supplies that you've been talking about.
That's great, because I am ready for questions.
Great. If you don't have a tortillon, is there a good way to make them at home with things that are just kind of laying about?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you can simply get yourself a piece of scrap paper and actually just kind of twirl it together and just use some scrap paper. And what I would recommend doing is take a piece of your and I'm looking for just a quick little piece of scrap paper here, but you can either take a regular piece of a clean piece of just printer paper, and I have one right here. You can just take this. I would just, and I'll show you how we can do this super quick. Take half a sheet here, roll it up from the corner, and you can just keep getting it tighter and tighter and tighter. I'm doing this really quickly. I would take my time a little bit more with it, kind of fold it on itself, and you can see how you'll end up getting like a little cone there. Pinch it And then you have your own homemade tortilla, and you can use like that. I would recommend, if you can use the copier paper, or you can use just really take a piece of your sketch paper and use the same kind of paper to make your own tortilla.
Fantastic. Do you ever recommend using mechanical pencils?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I seldom bring them up because not a like not a lot of people are fond of them, and they can be a little bit fussy. You do have to buy you have to buy the lead for it. So I would recommend, if you're going to be sketching with it, you want to make sure that you buy a B lead, a 2B or a 4B lead with it. Also, too, you can use them. Just be aware that the lead is a little bit more fragile and it will snap if you bear down on it very hard. But if you are heavy-handed, I would highly recommend practicing with a mechanical pencil. It will get you out of the habit of bearing down very, very hard on the paper. Because if you do that, you actually do something called scoring. So I'm going to bear down very hard right now while I'm making these lines. You might even be able to hear me make it. And then I'm going to get out my heavy duty eradicator here, and you're going to see that is just not going to go away very easily. And I can even run my finger over it and feel the little hills and valleys that I made in the paper. If you are naturally that heavy-handed and your drawings have these kinds of hills and valleys in it, that you're actually marring the tooth of the page, I really advise that you try sketching with a mechanical pencil. It will force you to lighten up the pressure on your hand, and it will force you to get a lighter touch. So that's part of the great value of a mechanical pencil.
Another question a little bit about the pencils here is do different manufacturers have different sort of shades? If you get like a 2B from one manufacturer versus another, do they look different, or are they generally pretty standardized?
They're generally pretty standardized. That's a really good question. And I will tell you that most pencil makers, I mean, who knew? Most pencil makers, their recipes for the actual what we call, the sort of layman's term, the lead of the pencil. It's not lead at all, but it's really interesting. Those are actually proprietary recipes. So yeah, it is true. They vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. I will tell you, I do have favorite manufacturers. I'm not going to mention them here, but I do have favorite ones because I feel like some pencils feel creamier to use and some feel drier to use. And you will notice that when you're drawing, you should go with what's most comfortable for you. There will be variations in value. So for example, company A's 2B pencil might be slightly lighter than company B's 2B pencil. But in general, the values don't vary that much.
Great. And just two more quick things. One, about the tortillon, like, do you peel the tortillon to expose more layers, or can you use like a kneaded eraser to clean it?
So no, you don't peel them, but if you do want to clean it, you just get a little piece of sandpaper and you can just rough up that edge there and clean off part of it. Now, one of the things that I do, and you're going to see this, you're going to notice it got a little bit cleaner there. I can use it. So one of the things that I do, though, is I keep around dirty tortillas. And the reason is because they will give you they can become a drawing tool and give you just a beautiful, subtle value. You can actually use them. So drawing is, as we're going to see, drawing is both an additive and subtractive kind of art form. And so this is an opportunity to sort of blend, but also I can also add some very, very light values as well. So sometimes I have some some dirty ones around for just that purpose. And then I always keep a couple extra clean ones around to just go in and blend as well.
Nice. One more really quick, since you brought up the sandpaper there, what grade of sandpaper do you recommend if you're going to be making your own?
This is like this super fine, or it's to tell you the truth, in a pinch, it's actually softer than an emery board. I don't remember the number. I think it's probably around 1,000, the 1,000 grade, but you can sharpen your nails on it very gently. It's not one of the heavy duty ones. You're going to notice, I'll bring it up closer to the thing. The grit is very, very fine on it. So I believe this is around 1,000.
Fantastic. We're right at 11 o'clock, just so you know as well. So we're about half an hour into our time.
Okay, super. So we've gone over our basic drawing materials. So now let's go ahead and start talking about values, okay? And when we talked about the questions were so helpful because, and I'm going to shift my I'm going to shift my drawing board just a little bit here, okay? You're going to see I have some ghost lines on the page. I'm going to sweep off some of these eraser crumbs. So let's start talking about values. One of the first things that you want to do, values are the lightness and darkness of that you create with something. And we were talking about the two different, we're talking about different values that you can get from different pencils. Now you can get a darker value by adding more graphite and bearing down, and you can also get more value by having a softer pencil. So let's look at what that means, okay? So this is a standard 2H pencil that folks use, as I mentioned, when you're doing any kind of standardized test. And one of the things you're going to notice when I do a large value area, you're going to notice that how I hold my pencil, I'm using the side of the pencil to create some value. And what I'm going to do is you can see I made some light pencil marks there. Hopefully you can see them. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a strip that is a value scale. I'm going to go from the darkest dark that I can make with this pencil to the lightest light, to the white of the paper. Now, as I said, I can create a darker value by adding graphite and adding more and going over it again. And I can also bear down a little bit, but notice that I am not bearing down so hard that I'm marring the paper. Okay, so this is my 2H value scale. This is about as dark as it gets. And it's always worth it that when you get a new pencil, again, find a corner of your page, the back of a page in your sketchbook, and just experiment with that pencil to see what kind of value scale you can get out of that. Now, this is when I can come in, and with my tortillon, I can come in and I can blend this out a little bit further. Look at that nice subtlety I can get right at the end there. And notice that when I use the tortillon, I use it both with the same strokes as the pencil. And then if I want to eliminate that texture that I created by laying down the value with those angled pencil strokes, notice that I go perpendicular to
Mary
it.
Ellen, can you move your drawing a little bit more to the right so it's centered in the frame for people? I think some people went down just a smidge. Thank you.
Okay.
That will help people who are having trouble, and then the blurriness will go away in a second once it sorts itself out.
It should. Are we good?
You might need to pull back a bit.
Yeah, let me see if we can get just real quick. I'm gonna let's see if we can. It might take another second. How's that looking?
Still a little bit blurry. I wonder if it's because it's trying to focus between the background and the paper. Since
Yeah.
you're using the corner of the page.
Yeah, let me do that. Let's try that.
And pull back maybe a smidge.
Okay. And folks, thank you so much for your patience. Sometimes,
Yes, it's still blurred. Do you want to switch to
let
your
me,
cameras back and forth a bit? Yeah.
yeah, okay, so you all see me for one moment. And then let's hope that once we come back, I think that's much better. Yeah, that's all we needed to do. So, okay, so I'm going to move over just a little bit more. And now it's going to become a lot easier to see because I'm going to use my 2B pencil. And notice I'm using the exact same amount of pressure, and notice how much darker right away my 2B pencil when I make that value scale. And you notice that I have a really, really broad range of values that I'm making. I'm going from the absolute darkest that I can do all the way to just the most subtle gray. And I'm really, layering in that area. Notice too that when I put down a value, this is really, really important. I do not make interesting lines. I make consistent, boring lines. So I'm going like this, literally. I'm just doing it really quickly. Resist the urge to do things like this. Okay, if you were to not look at this for a moment, notice that the first line you looked at was this one. I'm going to do that one more time, okay? If I cover this up, you're going to look at the squiggly line first. And that's because it's interesting. I want people to look at my overall drawing. I don't want people to look at the little lines that make up my drawing. So when I'm creating value and I'm using line to create that value, I want those lines to be just as consistent in width and also the spacing as I possibly can. And you're going to see I come in with my tortillon. I'm blending that out. And so I'm going from my darkest dark to my lightest light. And I can even bring that out just a little bit more there. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice right away, if you happen to have your 2H pencil and you've been doing this along with me, you're going to notice a difference between the feel between the 2H pencil, okay, and the 2B pencil. You're going to notice a much softer, much smoother feel with the 2B pencil. And that's because it has so much more graphite compared to the binder and to the clay. Okay, so there's our basics on our values. So why this is so important is because everything comes down to, and actually before I switch to my handout, I wanted to ask Libby, does anybody have any questions about the value scales?
Nope. People are just commenting on the lovely quality of your scribbles.
Oh my gosh, that's well, what we're going to look at next is, this is what we're going to draw next. And let me pull out a little bit so we get this focused. There we go. All right, so I have a photograph. And Libby, I'm going to switch my camera quickly again. And I apologize for people. I don't want to make you seasick, but I do want to make sure that we have a nice, clear focus. There we go. Okay, so now what I have here is this is what we're going to actually draw next. This is a photograph of a basic sphere. And this sphere has a single light source. When you draw, you want to reduce every single subject that you draw in your mind. When you're getting started, you want to reduce it to basic shapes. So do I see a circle? Do I see a rectangle, a triangle? Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that shape and you're going to combine it using value. So it's going to be shape, which is two-dimensional. Okay. And when we add value to it, we create the illusion of form. We create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional surface. So in this case, we have a circular shape. And when we imagine that we have a single light source, as we do in this photograph, coming from the upper left-hand corner, it's typically from the upper left-hand corner. Those of you who are lefties out there, you will want to imagine it coming from the other way, from the upper right-hand corner, because it will be easier for you to work your values. If you're left-handed, you want to have the lighted side on the right. If you're right-handed, you want to have the lighted side on the left. Next time you go to an art museum, have a little bit of fun. Go look at the still lifes, particularly Dutch master still lifes, and see where the light is coming from the left or from the right. And I guarantee you, oh, excuse me, I'm going to cough for a second. Excuse me. And I guarantee you, you are going to find that who's the left-handed artist and who's the right-handed artist. It's a little bit fun to do that. So we have our photograph here with our basic sphere. And I want you to notice some things about the photograph. On this side here, we have our brightest value. This is going to be, and if you look very carefully, you can see where the tip of my pencil is, that is a pure white. That is the white of the paper, or that is the lightest value in your value scale that you're going to have. Then as you move away, so this is the part of the surface of the sphere that is facing the light source directly. Now, of course, the sphere is rounded, so as it moves away from the sphere, okay, as it moves away from the sphere's surface moves away from the light source, it's going to become increasingly darker. But then something very interesting happens. Notice right here in this area, okay, in this area here, this is called the turning shadow. This is where the surface of the sphere finally turns completely away from the light source. So this is the backside, or the dark side of the moon, as you'd want to say. So this is the backside of the sphere here. But notice that something very peculiar happens. If you look at this drawing carefully, you're going to notice that this part of the shadow is quite dark. And it's a bit counterintuitive, because here, this backside of the sphere, where you would think it's the furthest from the light source, that's definitely true. And you would think the further it is the light source, the darker it would be. But that's in fact not the case. What's happening here is this is called reflected light. It's bouncing off of the surface of the table and bouncing back onto the sphere. So it creates a lighter value in this area. You'll notice too that the sphere casts a shadow, and this shadow is called the cast shadow. Notice too that it is soft at the edges and it fades as it goes out. So those are the fundamentals. Now, once you do this, and what we're going to do now is we're going to draw a sphere. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'll keep it handy for reference, but we're going to draw a sphere together, okay? So, and I think I just moved my camera again, which made my camera unhappy. And so I'm going to click back again. I'm glad we found a solution for this. That's the main thing. So if you could be patient, you'll see me with my camera again, and we're going to go right back. There we go. Okay, now we're going to be good to go. So let's draw a sphere together. All right. So to find a nice spot on your page here, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to draw a nice straight line. Okay, so you're just going to start here and hold your pencil as you normally would when you write. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to just move your hand down, and if you actually can feel the edge of a paper, sometimes you can even put a piece of paper there so the heel of your hand can feel that edge. You're just going to draw a nice straight line. Let's make it, see, the heel of my hand is actually guiding the tip of my pencil there. There you go. So I have a nice straight line, okay? This is going to be the center line of my sphere. Make this line about an inch or two. We don't want to draw it too large. Okay, let me move that over just a bit. So the next thing we're going to do is let's divide that line in half, okay? And you can take that edge of that paper if you want to again, and then what you can do is just again, put the heel of your hand on it, extend the pencil, and then because you feel that nice straight edge, you're going to draw a nice straight line for the most part. It's a little bit awkward situation there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from nice and even. I know that this measurement, I'm just eyeballing this, measures that, and then take my fingers to the other side. And now I have 4 points on here. So this is what you have. So we started with line, we used some dots, and now we're going to create some curves. So now one of the things you're going to notice is I don't draw too much like using my hand like this. You're going to, if you could see me drawing, you would notice that the heel of my hand is not flat, firm on the table as I draw these. I'm actually drawing more from my elbow and from my shoulder. So really good habit to get into, okay? And one of the things that's really nice about that, because if you have that sort of loose posture with your drawing, is it's very easy to sort of make corrections and also have some muscle memory. This one feels like that one, feels like that one when I make it, and feels like that one. Notice I'm drawing very, very lightly, okay? And I'm not getting all worried about it being perfect, okay? Very, very sketchy, okay? Now the next thing is, sometimes I like to do this just to remind myself, light source is coming from there, okay? So coming from the upper left-hand corner, upper right-hand corner for my lefties, okay? And then remember, when we look at this, when we look at our model here, okay? And I'll keep that partially on the page there. So let me move over a bit so folks can see that while we're drawing.
Can you keep shifting it to the right slightly?
Yeah.
Other way. There you go.
There we go.
Now it's centered. Thank you.
Great. So now folks can see our model, and now we're just going to go with that. So notice here that I'm going to work with the biggest shapes first. So I have a kind of sort of crescent moon shape here, right? Because this area here is very light. This area back here is pretty dark. And if I squint at it, that's what I really see. I see a lighter area here and a darker area in here. So I'm going to put that onto that shape of that shadow onto my sphere here, okay? So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to finish out my shapes. I've got the first shape is the basic shape of my object. The next shape is the largest shadow, okay? And the next shape is the other significant shadow, which is this cast shadow. Now you might ask yourself, how do I draw that? Now, notice right about here, I'm going to go right over. This is about, if I look at the center line here, it comes down about halfway. So I'm going to do the same thing here on my drawing. That's where that cast shadow touches that part of the sphere. And then I'm going to go right here. It's the same thing here I'm looking at. It's about a third of the way there. So that's where that is. Then if I measure here and here, I'm going to notice that that cast shadow extends about 1 radius out from the edge here. So it comes out to right about there. So if I measure that there, bring that down there. Now look at that. Now I have an idea about how I can draw this elliptical shape here. And I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to draw through and draw that elliptical shape. This lower part, I'm just drawing what I see. I'm making sure that it doesn't extend too far down. And now I have all of my big shapes there. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to get out my tortillon and my little plastic eraser here, maybe my kneaded eraser too. And I have those handy. I'll use a nice clean tortillon. And I'm gonna tuck this, as I mentioned to you that I like to do. I'm gonna tuck that into my hand. You're gonna see it there while I draw. And now I'm gonna start to put in those values. Now, you're gonna notice I did not make a lot of fussy corrections. And I'm also not erasing my construction lines. That's because I worked really lightly, and I know that some of these construction lines I probably will have to come back in and take out, but for the most part, I'm not going to have to worry about them, because once I start blending, I know that a lot of those are going to go away. They're just going to become part of the drawing. Now,
Mary Ellen, are you using a 2B right now? What pencil
I am. I'm using my B pencil right now. Now, notice that when I put in all of those values, notice that I'm kind of following that imaginary curve of that surface. Even though I'm working on a flat surface, I'm imagining that it's curved, and I'm keeping those lines very, very consistent. Now, I'm going to put my cast shadow drawing value in, and I'm going to use a very, very, again, boring lines, but I'm keeping those parallel to the surface that it would be sitting on. Now, here's a great point in the drawing to talk about, and I'm going to keep that value scale up there so you can see that as I'm working here. Sometimes we get a drawing and we look at it and it's just, I guess the best way I can describe it is how some of my younger students refer to it as meh. It's just sort of in between. It doesn't seem to have much going on with it. It doesn't have sparkle and life to it. Now, notice that when I look at this rough drawing that I have of the sphere here, most of the values are pretty much in the middle scale. Okay, when that happens, that's when you have to go back to your drawing and create darker darks and lighter lights. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to draw this very, very, I'm going to start to put in more, the darker value like that. And also I'm going to put much darker value closer to the sphere. Now, you will notice that reflected light is starting to emerge, and it's starting to create that illusion. It's starting to create that illusion of 3 dimensions. Now, when you get to about this point, okay, this is when I'm going to come in here. I'm going to take out some of these rougher edges here, take a little bit of this out, a little cleanup time, just a little cleanup time. And now I'm going to come in with my tortillon after I've done a little cleanup, and I'm very gently, I'm going to start to blend some of my values. Now, when you do this, I want to caution you, this is going to be half of the pressure that you were using, whatever you were using with your pencil. Very, very lightly. You do not want to burnish the page and grind the graphite into the paper. And if you notice that it starts to become very, very shiny, I'll do it on purpose here, up here. I'm really bearing down there, and you're going to see that it's actually starting to get a little bit shiny there. What happens is that you're actually activating the binder and turning it into a glue, and the heat of the friction is doing that, and it's going to start to stick to the paper, and that's going to create a lot of problems for you. You're not going to be able to lift out highlights, and you're not going to be able to blend as subtly as you hope to. So keep a light hand, There's always time to add more. There's always, time to work the drawing a little bit, but you don't want to overwork it. Now notice I'm using that tortillon in the same direction here, and I'm going to let that edge get really soft and really blurry. It's okay. Think about when you walk in the wintertime and you see your shadow on the sidewalk with the sun behind you. You're going to notice that the shadow is very, very well defined around your lower legs and your feet, but it's not so well defined up by your head. Your shape is elongated, and the edges are very, very fuzzy and very, very, and not very well defined at all as it moves away. And you can see we're really starting now to get these beautiful subtleties. I'm purposely going in here, gonna darken down that value. Look how that pops at that point. And it really is becoming a spherical object that's sitting on the surface. And Libby, while I'm doing the finishing touches on here, you feel free to stop me at any time if any questions pop up.
Can do. Let's see. Someone did ask if you always draw your lines from top to bottom, because they seem to do the opposite.
Oh, you should do you. I am not. I think you're going to notice that I'm going to interrupt my answer for a second there. You're going to notice I'm starting to use some circular motion here. Notice you can't see it. You can't see those lines because they're blending in, because I want to darken down that value. I'm really trying to get this nice dark value here. So adding lots and lots of graphite there. Yeah, no, you should draw. You should do you. What can I say? I don't think there's any right way or wrong way to draw. The advice that I give you is based on my experience and what works for me, and also just pitfalls that you might want to avoid, like I was saying earlier about you don't want to burnish the paper, you don't want to you don't want to mar your drawing surface, because you want to have as much control over that surface as possible.
Mary Ellen, I just noticed you sort of tapped in and removed a little bit of your drawing, and someone had asked, if you put too much graphite or value down, how do you remove the excess?
Oh, it's a great question. That's where this guy comes in handy. If I was really, really unhappy with something that I did, I can come in and I can just lift it. No, watch, this is great. It acts like silly, like if you all remember the weird 1970s toy Silly Putty, you can just make it into a flat area and then come in and then let's press it down. And did you see how it lifted all that up? I'll do that again. Let me make that dark again. And then you just take the dirty part and roll it into the eraser, make a new clean part, and then come in and just lift that out. And you might have to do it a couple of times, and you see you can lighten that up. So if you got a little crazy, you got a little heavy-handed there, that's no worries. You can go in and you can lift that out. And as a matter of fact, you're going to see I'm going to be using this kneaded eraser a lot just in the next few minutes. I'm going to create I want to get some really strong value in this area here to really pop that, to really pop that, that reflected light.
Mary Ellen, when you're doing your shading, do you blend from light areas into darker? There's someone who seems to be dragging their graphite sort of into the lighter areas. I'm wondering what technique you might be doing.
Well, actually, that's a great question. I tend to work I tend to work from the darker areas and then work out. However, now notice that my tortilla is really, really dirty right now. If I need to go up here to work, I don't want to create a problem for myself. So I can go in and I can switch my tortillon and go backward, go the other way, go from light to dark. This tortillon is a little bit lighter. And then also to make it even more, I can come in with the kneaded eraser as well. So kind of pay attention to it. You generally want to work from dark to light in when you're blending but sometimes you're going to have to go back the other way.
Did you split your kneaded eraser? It looks smaller than the ones that people might have purchased.
Yes, I did split it. I did, because it just doesn't, the full, that's just me. I have small hands, and it doesn't, the whole thing is a little bit too unwieldy for me. So I do split mine.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions right now.
Okay, great. So here we go. We've got our sphere here. Needs a little tweaking, but so we've got the general gist here. Now, another thing.
Sorry, Ellen, I'm sorry, really quickly too. We're about an hour in, just so you know.
Great. So really quickly, one of the things we can do, we can add a little bit of background if you want. I'm going to add just a little background value. This is creating some contrast for our highlight, and we could just fade it out. That's it. One of the advantages of having a dirty tortillon. We can create just a little bit, and we can sharpen up that edge a little if we want, and then blend that out. Again, working from the dark, out to the light, let it fade a little bit. And then we have our sphere there, and working that way. Just like that. And notice the relationship between our highlight here. And if I wanted to, I could make that highlight a lot more dramatic, closing in here. Okay. And bringing that so that it's like a straight line through the sphere there to that reflected light. I'm gonna have to clean up this edge here. It's bothering me, but but we'll leave it at that because time is of the essence. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to leave this because now you've drawn something. And for those of you, this is the first time you picked up pencil and paper, congratulations, you have completed your first drawing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a little subject in here. And our subject is a daffodil bulb. And I'm going to remove this. I'm going to bring a daffodil bulb here. Okay. And you may say to yourself, I can't draw that. Well, of course you can, because look at the basic shape that we have here. Okay. And look at the basic shape that we have with the daffodil bulb. Okay. This is no problem. You've got this. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start again. let's do it so that I'm right below it so you can see this drawing as a reference, okay? And I'm going to move my daffodil over and that over so you can see it. Keep all my equipment here a little bit handy over the side. And so we're going to get started with our daffodil bulb. Now, let's talk a little bit about how to measure here, okay? You don't need a ruler. Because this is a small object, okay, I can draw this from life. And so what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to use my fingers, or you can use your pencil, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw I'm going to draw just the sphere of it. So here, it's about, let me see, about up here and about down here. And here, and I'm going to draw it at a little bit of an angle just to give it a little life. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to keep that center line. Okay. So there's my diameter, and I'm going to go ahead And I'm going to put in the other diameter up here. Now, one of the things that I noticed about this is that this has started to grow, and it's a little less of a perfect sphere. So I'm going to just cinch it in a bit. Okay. And I'm going to get started. There's this part of the bulb right there. I've got that basic shape to it now. Okay. The next thing is I have this area up here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, oh, I just made something really messy. Sorry about that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just add up here. We're going to talk a little bit more.
Mary Ellen, you're still using the 2B pencil?
I am. We're going to be using that 2B pencil all the way through. So you don't need to worry about grabbing another pencil. And then what I'm going to do, this area here, I measured this and brought this over here. It's about, let me see, the tallest one comes up to about here. And then this one's a little lower. That one's a little lower. See, I'm just making little marks for myself. And I noticed that this area, this here is that sort of rough part of the bulb here with all these beautiful light little papers that just wrap the bulb up. Now on the bottom here, I'm going to treat, I know you look at all of this, especially if you're just new to drawing, you look at all of these little fiddly bits down here and you think, oh my goodness, no way. But nope, I want you to look at it as a big shape. Okay, so there we go. There's that big shape right there. I'm going to put that in. And most of these fiddly bits, okay, they end about there. Now you're going to notice that I'm actually creating a little cylinder here. Let's take a moment and stop and talk about the cylinder, okay? So if I'm going to draw a cylinder, I'm going to have one side, and I'm going to have a side here and a side here. And I'm going to have an elliptical shape at the top and the same elliptical shape at the bottom there. And when I think about how the light, again, we're going to think about the light coming from that upper left-hand corner. When the light comes on the cylinder, I have a dark side and a lighted side. Cylinders typically, cast a shadow off like that. And we're just going to do the cylinder really quickly. And notice that turning shadow, it's going to be, for a cylinder, it's going to occur right about here, kind of about midway on that dark side. And then I can come in with my tortillon and I can begin to blend it. Now you might say to yourself, uh-oh, she forgot the reflected light. Oh, this is where your kneaded eraser comes in. Now, one thing
Mary Ellen, can you just zoom out maybe a little bit so people can, I think some people are struggling to see the cylinder in the top right corner of your page. Thanks. That's perfect. Yep.
Okay, super, thank you. So now one of the things that's really fun, now your cylinder, if it's solid on the top, okay, it's going to be very bright. Okay, and we're going to have a little bit of value on the side and the edge here. And our reflected light will be down here, just coming up a little bit. Okay. Remember I mentioned to you it's additive and subtractive. So sometimes we add things, sometimes we take things away. So there's our basic cylinder. If the top is solid, okay, it's going to be brightest over here. And then we'll get just a little bit of value over on that side there. Just a hair, okay? We can emphasize that by creating a little bit of back a little bit of background there. And I like to lighten up just a little bit in here. There we go. And there's our cylinder. Now, when we have this, let me make that top a little. Now, if we do have a cylinder that actually is hollow inside, we're actually going to take that away. And there will be a shadow on the side, the light source side. It'll be a very dark shadow in there. And that will create the illusion that the cylinder is hollow. So just like with our sphere, like once you can draw a sphere and you understand the principles of highlight, okay, so the highlight here, the turning shadow, the reflected light, and the cast shadow, and you've practiced drawing basic shapes, so all of the basic shapes that you would want to practice with, so we can look at these basic forms like this. And you can see where we have where in a cone shape, you've got that turning shadow in the cylinder, the turning shadow as well. And you can practice. This actually, I do mention this book on my website. This book is from Arthur Guptill, and it's his Fundamentals of Drawing. Guptill was an architect and an illustrator back in the early part of the 20th century. It's a beautiful book. You can get it as a inexpensive Dover reprint, and it's really very, very helpful. But it gives you a chance to see. And one of the things I would recommend now when you're stuck in a staff meeting, now you have something, a little bit of mind candy when you're in there drawing cylinders, drawing spheres, drawing cylinders, drawing eggs and cones. And this is like doing your musical scales. This will help you so much in doing all of your drawing. So all we need for getting back to our bulb, all we need is a cylinder and a sphere. So now let's start to put in some of those basic shadows. So,
Mary Ellen, can you zoom back in a little bit, maybe on the bulb again, and thanks, and just maybe to our left, your right. If you can move the camera. There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Great. So now I'm going to start to put in those shadows. Okay. This is actually going to cast a little bit of a shadow here. You'll notice I haven't started putting in any details yet, and I'm putting in the shadows. You want to do that because the details, if you don't have the proportions and the big shapes correct, the details aren't going to help you. You need to sort of make sure that, if I squint at the subject and then I squint at my drawing, I'm seeing basically the same thing. It's going to look like a cartoon of that. Now notice I'm starting to refine a little bit. That's because I'm going back and forth. I'm squinting here, squinting there, and making sure that they match each other. Okay. Now comes the fun part. Now you can start to put in a little leaf here. Okay, and then we had another one up here, and this third one's quite lovely. This one has a little twist to it, so I want to keep that little twist, and it also has a smaller leaf budding just inside of it. And I'm going to take a little artistic license because this is a little bit of a tight space because I have my other drawings up there. So I'm just going to take a little artistic license, make it a little longer, a little more curved, just to give it some artistry there, just a little grace to it. And I'm going to start to put in some of those details. Now, as I put in those details, I've noticed since I've been putting in all this value, it's time for me to sharpen my pencil. Now, one of the things I want to remind you is sharpening your pencil is free. So, and I mention that because sometimes as artists, I don't know why, I get, I'm drawing away, and I'm fussing, and I'm not getting the line, and I just can't seem to get it right. And then I realize, oh my goodness, I just need to sharpen my pencil. And so, and I have this sort of private joke with myself. It's free. I don't have to pay to sharpen my pencil. So
Mary Ellen, would you mind just tilting the camera up a little bit or moving the paper down? Just other way, sorry, towards you. Apologies. Bring it towards you so you can see the top of the bulb. There we go. And to your left or right. Other way, sorry, other way. Yes, there we go. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now you'll notice I'm sticking with basic shapes, but my shapes are getting progressively smaller. Okay, I haven't started with all these fiddly bits down there. I'm not going to do that yet. I want to get in these big leaves, these budding leaf shapes up here. And now I'm going to start to look at some of this beautiful papery covering. And you notice I'm using that sharp tip to my pencil. Now, do you see that I'm drawing the lines of the edges in, and I'm doing that right on top of the big values that I just put in? And that's okay, because that's as it should be, because that way now I don't have to worry about this is always going to be the darker side of the drawing. And that's what I want, because if I get that sense, that turning sense of the bulb, that feel of that, then I know that my bulb is going to appear three-dimensional. There's also a really lovely texture, this sort of venation in this beautiful papery covering. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is I'm going to put that venation in the highlight. I am not going to go through, even though it is there, okay, in every part of the bulb. I'm not going to go through and do it. Drawing is like poetry, okay? You use just enough to say what you want to say. You don't want to be literal in your drawing. You want to let your viewer's eye finish out some of the subject. So one of the things you're going to notice is I let these lines fade out. Sometimes I pick them up again. Some areas I'm going to go a little bit darker, and some places they completely disappear. Now this technique is called lost and found line. And what it does is it creates these lovely little spaces where that's where the magic happens in a drawing, because our viewer's eye, and that's what we're really doing in drawing, right? We're inviting someone in to our point of view. We're inviting someone in to see the beauty that we see. And that's what makes it so special, because it's a universal language. It's something that everyone can appreciate. But you don't want to be pedantic. You don't want to be like, look at this edge. It continues all the way down. No one likes to be told like that. And drawing is the same way. You want the poetry of the object to come through. You want the person viewing your work to become a participant in the work. And so you want to make sure that you use a little bit of that lost and found line, and don't tell them everything. Just give them the idea of what's happening. So that's why, like right in this area here, you're going to notice I'm not going to put any more of those lines in there, just enough to give folks a sense of that texture. Now I'm blending out a little. It's starting to get into that sort of, it's all gray area. That's okay for now. Just want to do a little blending. see where my darkest darks and my lightest lights are, and that all of these sort of semi-transparent papery tissue of the bulb is coming through. One thing here, I'm going to lighten up a little bit just in general on this whole side of the bulb. Notice how that gave it a nice turn right away. Keep the lines a little lighter on the lighted side, a little darker, a little bolder on the dark side of the bulb there. Now we're going to go down into the fiddly bits. Okay, now don't worry. Okay, they are just little strings. And again, I'm going to put just, this is a place where you can do all those fun, interesting little lines. And I'm going to do this sort of little root form, but I'm going to keep this general shape. And you can see how I'm adding. I'm going to bring that up a little bit since I'm working on that part of the drawing. Okay. I'm going to add those in. And I'm going to put some unfinished so they look like some are behind others. Okay, but I don't want to make this, since the drawing is not about the roots, okay, it's about the whole drawing, I don't want to put too much detail down here. I don't want to make too much fuss down here because the human eye loves detail. It loves contrast. It always goes to where the detail and the contrast are. And I don't want to create too much interest down there. So I'll fuss with it now. But you're going to notice that probably not going to do a lot of fuss in here other than to create a little bit of rhythm of dark and light. Notice that it is going kind of dark, light, just so that people get, when people look at the drawing, they get a sense of the texture and of the form of these little nascent roots.
Mary Ellen, while you're working on that shading, someone had asked, are you always shading in the same direction? Or are you doing any sort of cross hatching at all?
Oh, it depends. That's a great question. So at first I shade going, reinforcing the form. So, just like I was saying when I was drawing the sphere, and and right now as I'm working on the bulb, I'm reinforcing that, I'm getting that turning shadow in of the spherical part of the bulb, and then also of the cylindrical part of the bulb there. So I'm getting that shadow in there and I'm working, completely to make that form. Now, when I start to go into some of these other areas, see, I want to make that, now it's really starting to turn, which is great. Now I'm going to actually, so some of the shading I'm going to use to create that texture. So I'm actually going with the pattern that's in there. And then other parts, I'm kind of basically going with the flow, to get the effect that I need to get. And because I'm blending, I don't worry too much about cross hatching unless I'm actually trying to record a texture that's on the bulb itself. So cross hatching, for those of you for whom this is a new term, is when I shade like this, and then I go literally in the opposite angle over top like that. It is a wonderful technique to use when you're using pen and ink and you can't blend. You can also cross hatch this way, and then you can continue to lay that on top. Because we're using pencil and we can blend, you can generally, as long as you're not heavy-handed, okay, you can go along laying down the values as you need them to be. Now you're going to notice I'm creating a little bit of texture in here to get that layering effect of all of those. And I'm going to move my camera up just a hair there. How's that, Libby?
Great. I was just going to ask you to do that. So perfect.
Okay. And now, once again, I'm going to sharpen up my pencil here. And because I'm going to put in a little bit of detail, I'm also got some of these things, again, I want to see, I want to keep that value scale. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to put in some of these little ragged edge details. But notice that I'm making my darkest darks in the dark area. I know that's a lot. It sounds silly when you say it. Keeping my darkest darks in the dark. But that's generally what you want to do. And then see, this is going to be like almost a full value scale just on that one leaf, because it's quite dark down here where there's a little bit of cast shadow. In there. Oh, see, that's what happens when you make your construction lines a little too dark. You want to keep those construction lines light, because now I can't get rid of that mark. I would have to come in with the pink eraser and really bring that out. It's a little nerve-wracking to bring the pink eraser in. There we go. Now, the other thing that you can have too, and again, this is an old draftsman's tool, but you can also use a dust brush. If you can't find a dust brush, you can find an old paintbrush. I have a Japanese sumie brush that sometimes I use. Any kind of soft brush, so that you don't want to wipe your hand across it to erase anything. A lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth might ensue if you do that, because it, especially working with B pencils, they're very, very soft, and you can smudge the whole thing, and it can be a little heartbreaking. So you want to be careful about that. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I want to come in here. See, there's this part where they don't meet. So notice that I made my kneaded eraser very, very narrow, and I came in here and I cleaned up those edges so I could get those delicate tips in there. Now this one also has a bit, someone asked me about when you go too dark, and there's a great example. There's a little bit of texture there, but I'm going to take some of it, put it in, and then take some of it out, so it's not too bold. And it's just wonderful. There's a whole landscape with all of these delightful little curled edges and tips. There's even some fun things. One of the things that I would really recommend adding is when you get basically like these little wild roots here, you know, as you get towards the end of your drawing, it's always fun to add something. And this drawing, I would say, just to give you a sense, we're probably only going to get really about 70% through any of our drawings. That includes the sphere and the cylinder. Because there's a whole other, you know, then you're really tweaking the values and tweaking all of the detailing in there. That whole other layer that goes in. This one also has some areas that are quite dark, and so you can go in and start putting in those dark areas. And remember, you're not going to have anything that is completely black in this area here. As a matter of fact, I'll go in and I'll lift out some of that, because this is the lighted side. Your darkest darks are going to be on the dark side. So if you keep that, you'll always have that illusion, that wonderful illusion of it being a three-dimensional form on your drawing there. So now, then this is where the fun happens. You can kind of come up, and maybe we're going to do a little twisted fiddly one right there. One of the things that I like to do, especially with these bulbs, is there's always, it's a little bit darker, these roots, when they get tight up against the bulb. So I'm going to go in and put a little bit of dark value in here. So that,
Mary,
yes.
go ahead. I was just going to tell you, we have about a half an hour left.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
So we're going to leave the bulb right now because we're going to go to the star of the show. And the star of the show, and I'll show you in a few minutes about like how I've been working here and how I have things. But our star of the show is just the wonderful daffodil. And now hopefully by now you're thinking, I think I got this. I think I can try a daffodil. So I've got some daffodils here. We've got a beautiful daffodil here. And what I want you to look at, to notice about our daffodil, and I'm going to move the camera up a little bit so you can take a broader view of it. I might have to come back. Here, let me do this. Okay. And I think I might have to go out and come back again, Libby, just because I think it's unhappy with me again.
That's fine.
So let me do that. Okay, so I'm back here. Okay, and now we'll go back to, there we go. Oh, goody. Okay, so now, we've got our daffodil here. So what I want you to do is, this is where you're going to start to use your artist's eye. So when we look at the daffodil, whenever you look at your subject, you want to think of what are the big shapes that you see. Now, don't get caught down into the petals right away. Notice that this is a circle, okay, with a circle inside of it, okay, and a third circle yet on the very, very interior. Look at it from the side, right? And again, we have a disc of petals. Now, it is true the petals are twisting and turning and things, but I want you to see it for the absolute basics that it is. We have this disc that's, see, it's connected by a cone. And then here we have a cylinder and then a disc on top of the cylinder. So let's look at that. So while we draw it, so if I were to draw this from the side, and I'm going to do it just in the most basic of shapes, okay? So I would have a center line, okay? I'll draw a little bit darker so folks can see me. I'm going to have that center line. I'm going to have, right? I'm going to have this basic cone here. All right. And then from this basic cone, I can even measure out a little bit. Let's see, did I get my cone about the right size? I did. And so my disc is right here of the petals. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw this as an elliptical shape, right? That my cone is in the middle of. So this is if I were to draw it from the side. And doing little sketches like this, especially for a subject that you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I can tackle that. Doing these basic shape sketches from the start can be so reassuring, can be so helpful. So, and then from here, right, we have our cylinder that meets down there, comes out about that far. So here's our cylinder here. And then we have another disc. It's a little bit smaller on top of there. And here's and notice that the stem always in the center of the flower. So there we go. We're looking at like a cartoon of the side of the daffodil. Let's look at it from the front. Okay, so we look at it from the front. We have, I'm going to use the side of my paper, make a nice straight line there. Okay, I'm going to divide this in half, make sure that I've got my measurements correct. Divide that in half. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my first circle. Let's double check that. Nothing worse than finding you did your measurements wrong from the start. That can be kind of frustrating. That's also why we work very, very loosely and very, very lightly from the start, so you can make corrections easily. You don't want to fall in love with some little detail and then find out that it's just completely in the wrong place. So now what I'm doing is I'll go ahead and I'll make my cross section there. And I'm looking at my daffodil. I can measure directly from that. And I would recommend, this is a great, we're having a very rainy day where I am right now. And this is a great rainy day activity, go out and find something, hold it, look at it, sketch it from different angles, and don't burden yourself with this idea that everything has got to be a finished work of art. Just enjoy yourself, enjoy the looking, and enjoy the learning. Let the flower teach you. Now, one of the things now, and of course we have all of our fascinating, so we have this series of concentric circles, okay, that we're using, still a little loose. Let's start putting in those petals, okay? So this is our ruffled edge here, and I can even make that a little bit. Look at that. It's so funny. It actually starts looking like the flower as soon as you put that little ruffly edge in there. I've got my one petal here on this side. Now remember, they're going to have some symmetry to them. So I can put my one petal here. I'm not getting into the details, just putting in a basic petal. Okay, got my other petal over here. Okay, making them very standard. Notice I didn't fall in love with anything yet. I'm just putting them where they need to be for now. So there's my basic daffodil. Okay, my petals are all aligned. And see, one of the things that's really neat about when you work like this is recognizable as a daffodil. Why is it recognizable? Well, it's recognizable because the proportions and all of the parts are relating to each other in the way that we recognize a daffodil. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, since I've drawn lightly, I can just take my kneaded eraser. I'm going to remove some of this circle on the outside, okay, because it's kind of a hard geometric shape, and we want to start bringing out some of the organic beauty in this. But the only way we can do that, the only way we can guarantee that we can capture that organic beauty is by first setting up that geometric regularity that we know this plant obeys when it grows. So now I'm looking at my flower, I'm looking at these beautifully, so we've got this wonderful petal here, and we're moving along at a good clip. I don't want you to feel like, oh my goodness, this is hopeless, I can't keep up. People ask me many times, how long have you been drawing? And I've been drawing since I can remember. I can't remember not drawing. In fact, my one brother told me that he can't remember me not drawing, and he's older than me. And so practice, I won't say practice makes perfect, but practice certainly makes for, I would say, more practice, but also it has benefits to it. And one of them is that you train your eye and you can react a little more quickly. So if you're feeling like this is going hopelessly fast for you, and I hope it's not hopelessly fast, but if you're feeling a little bit that way, please don't. Please be gentle on yourself, and please be assured that you will learn in your own time and way, and that is the perfect way. So there we go. Now I started getting my petals looking a little more natural here, a little more what I actually what I'm actually seeing here. This one, not quite. This one, I think I tilted it a little too much. This one needs to come up and come in a little bit more. Okay. And so now from here, now we're going to start to have some fun. Now let's put in that we have a shadow here. It's very dark down inside the flower. So and notice that I'm doing a radiating pattern for my values. And I'm actually going to start to put in just a little bit and seeing some of the interior parts of the flower there. And notice how I made those come out, and I'll bring that over more centered on the thing, and I'll move my shadow out of the way there so you can see that just a little bit better. And then, of course, I'm going to start to do a little blending here. Now, when you have the interior of the flower, you really have to pay attention to your values. Draw what you see, not what you think. Always do that, okay? We think way too much. Don't think when you draw. Just see. It's really important. Now, notice I'm going to carry some of this value up, and that's going to help me capture some of those little wrinkles and things. Now, notice this is not, again, not nearly as uniform as I drew it. It has these little ragged edges. I'm going to start to bring those in now. See, I'm going from that very hard geometric form, and you're going to see it's dissolving now. We start with those hard geometric shapes just so we can see the balance, the order, the symmetry that takes place, and then we celebrate the uniqueness of the flower. Then we jump into it. You know, I always remember, one of my grandmothers would say, you know, don't fall in love too quickly, you know, and in drawing, that's very, very true. You don't want to fall in love too quickly. Just enjoy the journey. Now, you're going to notice I'm starting to put in some little shadows that I see here and there. But one thing that I do know is this side in here. Watch what happens here. This side is going to be darker all the way around. And I'm putting in that darker value, and I'm following the venation and texture that I see in the petals. Okay, that's super important, because that, again, is going to contribute to making the flower look more real. And sometimes petals cast shadows onto each other. It's kind of fun when you can capture that. Or that cylinder cup casts a shadow, so you can start to bring that in. But one of the things I want you to remember, always go back to that initial value scale, okay? So that I've made a decision that my darkest dark is down here, inside the flower. And that's where it's going to remain. I do not want to make another dark, another black, essentially, or another darkest value someplace out there. That will mess up the visual hierarchy. That'll confuse the visual hierarchy to the viewer of your drawing. So this way you set up a sense of dark to light, which is telling me as the viewer what's closest to me and what's furthest away. You can do it either way. I know a lot of times people say, should I make the things that are farther away darker, or should I make them lighter? It doesn't matter which way you do it. Unless, of course, it's landscape painting, then it does. But it doesn't matter which way you do it when you're drawing objects on a page. But whatever you do, be consistent with it. Okay, so there's our basic daffodil that we have. And again, I would call this about 60% done, but I want to watch our time, Libby, because I
Yep,
have
we got
some,
about 15 minutes.
and
Yep.
yeah, because we have some really cool stuff. Now, these sketches, I don't want you to panic, okay? These sketches, I'm gonna put them all on my website, so you'll be able to see them,
Can
okay?
you pull out just a smidge?
I
Just pull the
sure
camera back. Thanks.
I sure can. And I'm going to put these all on the website give me a day or two, and then you'll be able to go and look at those drawings on the website. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about because we've got about 15 minutes left, and this time, Libby, I'm going to switch to my big camera, to me. And what we're going to do is I'm going to move that camera out of the way. We're going to talk a little bit about keeping a sketchbook, okay? Super fun. So everybody loves to keep sketchbooks, and there's all different kinds of ways that you can do it. One of the things that's really important is to, again, as I've said earlier in our course, is about, keeping a regular time to draw. Schedule a time for yourself to draw every week if you can. Now, that being said, I have to be honest, there are weeks and days and weeks that get away on me, and I realize, oh my goodness, I haven't drawn, I haven't painted. So here's some things that I have found that helped me, okay? And I'll share those with you today. The first thing is some people, I am not a journaler. I would be honest with that. But I do enjoy kind of keeping a drawing journal. And you should find the sketchbook that works for you. I've had different sketchbooks throughout my life, different styles of sketchbooks. This is one that I'm fond of now. I love to take time to sketch places where I have to wait in line. It's a great opportunity. Keep your sketchbook with you. Keep it in the dashboard of your car, in the back somewhere. Keep a pencil. You can sketch while you're waiting in line. I love to, you're going to notice I combine with watercolor a lot, but I love to sketch objects that I see when I go to the museum. This is a Chinese teapot that I really loved. You can also, I think it's fun to combine kind of scrapbooking. A lot of times I'll use papers, decorative papers, and I'll add those to, I also enjoy doing calligraphy, as you can probably notice. I keep, let me see, I have some cards that I've kept that I like, people have sent me. I put those in my sketchbook. Sketches for ideas that I have. For other drawings, I also do printmaking, so I enjoy looking at those or having those kinds of sketchbooks. And sometimes I even keep track of, so this was a printmaking class that I took. I keep my notes in my sketchbook. So you can use it as kind of a notebook, a scrapbook, a journal, if that works for you. Other things that I've enjoyed doing is having sketchbooks that are single subject and focused on a single subject. So for that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, is in a moment. I had some fish at one time, so I used an accordion sketchbook, a small one, to sketch the fish throughout a series of days. And so it became this, this nice long work of art. So these are accordion sketchbooks, and they typically have a little band around them so you can keep them closed. Another thing that I was fond of doing is creating sort of works of art that sort of kind of build from a series of sketches. So I was using this actually and doing experiments in mixed media. So these are some prints, and then I added some drawings to them. These were literally, I did the sketchbook, I created the background, let that dry, did some printmaking on top of it, then carried the sketchbook around and decided that it needed to be filled with little birds that I saw, again, in the city while I'm waiting and looking at things is I have a fondness for what I like to call LBJs, little brown jobs, little brown sparrows. I like little brown moths too, and things like that. So, so you know, putting those in and creating a sketchbook that has a theme on it. When you do your kind of plein air sketching, one of the things that I'm really fond of doing, I love to, and I'll hold this up to the thing, is to think about how you could compose your page. Think about creating a larger drawing, a space for your notes. Make sure that you date things. Maybe you even make a note of the weather, the lighting, you know, where you are. And then also you can create smaller areas. So if you have an area down the bottom here, you can do a little vignette. This strategy can be extremely helpful if you only have a short amount of time. So one of the things you can do is, because cell phones are so handy with their cameras, you can snap a quick picture of something, do some details, you know, take it from, again, like we talked about with the flower, you want to take your subject from several different angles, take it from the angle that you want to draw, but then take it from other angles so that you can go back and remind yourself what is the full structure that you're of the subject that you're drawing. And then from there, you can use those when you get back to your studio, you know, do a quick sketch in your sketchbook. And then when you go back and you have a little more time, you have a rainy day, you have a quiet moment, you can use your cell phone and you can go back and return to that sketch. So that can be super, super helpful. Now, one of the things that the drawing that I really, the method that I really want to share with you today is along the lines of these accordion sketchbooks. And this is about, you'll notice behind me, I have a large glass jar. I'll pull this up, okay? And I'm forcing bulbs, you know, in my jar. One of the things that's really nice about having a clear glass jar is that I'm able to see the root form on the bottom there. A taller jar works a little bit better, I find, because it actually supports the flower as you're forcing the bulb. So that's very, very helpful. And and it's great because it's clear. You can look through it, you can draw it. And one of the things that's really fun is creating a kind of commitment to get you to draw every day. And so when you draw this, I'm really fond of using these accordion sketchbooks. And what you can do is you can draw your bulb as it changes every day. And you have the opportunity to create a sketchbook that's all about the journey of this flower into the world. So it's really a lot of fun. And what I like is, for me, what's worked really well for me is that it creates that sense of commitment that I have to draw today. I can't miss my flower. I can't miss how it changes. And it really builds your eye to on how to see those details, those subtle changes in value, in color, in shape, and in form. The other thing that really helps too is if you can find a sketch buddy. It's great to have a friend who's kind of like texting you, you know, have you sketched today? I'm not a social media person, but there's a great deal of sketch prompt apps that you can get. Also, there's something called Inktober, which gives you a sketch prompt every day during the day of October to get you to sketch from that subject, which is a lot of fun to do. So anything that gets you sketching regularly, you know, and I wouldn't start out with a commitment of, oh, I have to sketch every day. What I would start out with is, I'm going to sketch every Saturday morning, or I'm going to sketch every Sunday morning, or whatever works for you. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you, one of the things that you probably noticed in my little sketchbooks here is, and this is one I wanted to share with you. This is one of my accordion sketchbooks. I did not buy it this way with that background. Okay, it came just white like that. And what I did was I created a background for it. Okay, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to switch my camera again, and I'm going to show you how I did that and some different effects that you can do to make that, to make some interesting backgrounds for sketching on. And this will also help you dip your toe into the water for watercolor. So let me switch my camera again. I'm going to bring it up so I don't make everybody really disoriented. And then we're going to switch, and here we are. Okay. So you're going to see I have a piece of watercolor paper here. You know, if I were going to do this, use this sketchbook, I did it actually, well, my husband's an artist too, so I'm really lucky about that. So he doesn't think that I'm strange when I do things like this, but I actually taped this to a wooden floor. That's why it has the perfect edges on it. And I just taped it to a wooden floor, and then I put the wash on it. And what I did was, you always want to tape it. This is called stretching your paper, and you want to tape it because this will keep your paper flat when it gets wet. And then when it won't buckle and get little hills and valleys in it that the pigment can run into in places where you may not want it to run in. So what I've used here is I've used regular painter's tape here, and I'm just going to really quickly show you. I would just tape this down. I have another piece of paper here. This is just a standard, you know, classroom drawing board. And I'm just going to tape half on the paper, okay? And then I'm going to tape half on the drawing board. And again, this is just painter's tape from any DIY store. Again, there is something called artist tape. You don't have to buy that. You can just buy the regular painter's tape, and that's going to work just fine for you. So now just run your finger along the edge to make sure that the edge next to the paper is sealed. You don't want your pigment to run underneath, okay? I'm going to pull out just a little bit, because then what you're going to do is you want to get the paper just a little bit wet. Okay, I'm going to do the first one up here, just a light coat on it. You notice I have a nice broad brush here. And then I have some watercolor here. This is my palette. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to earth tones. Earth tones tend to be non-staining pigments. And I'm just going to put a nice wash on this. I typically put washes that go from dark to light. So I might keep one edge a little, or one corner a little bit darker, and then a little bit lighter. Now, why would I be concerned about it being a non-staining pigment? Well, one of the things that's great is if it's a staining pigment, you have to think of your paper just as you would a piece of fabric. If it's a staining pigment, the fibers of the paper will stain and they cannot be lifted. However, earth tones are tend to be a little bit different. You can lift them with your eraser once they're dry, which is very nice because you can get to the white of the highlight of the white of the paper underneath and create a highlight in order to do that. Now,
Mary Ellen, what type of watercolor paper are you using again?
Oh, this is a 90-pound watercolor paper. Actually, these are both 90-pound watercolor paper, and what they are 5x7 postcards. Is actually what they are. So I often make postcards for people. Now, while this is wet, okay, you're gonna love this. I take some plastic wrap. Make sure it's really wet. Don't, and it should be really soupy. Not so much that, the paper is starting to peel or anything, but you can see it's not running, but it's definitely, it is running a little bit there. Okay, that's a little too soupy. I'll lift some of that out, but that's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some everyday plastic wrap, and I'm going to press that down onto it. And what's going to happen is I'm going to let this stay. I'm just going to let this dry. And you can see what's happening is some of the pigment is gathering around some of the folds. And what will happen is I'll end up getting a really terrific texture. You want, and you know, you're going to notice this is very light because remember, you're going to be drawing. Here's one of the bulbs I already started on here. You're going to be drawing on top of it. So you want to make sure that whatever you do, you keep it light and keep it kind of somewhat simple, so that your drawing will show up. The background will compete with your drawing on top of it. But you're going to see, you're going to get all this lovely sort of crinkled fold pattern. And what I often do is I make up a bunch of these and I just wait until the subject shows itself for that book. Now, another technique. Oh,
Mary Ellen, I'm sorry. We have about 2 minutes left, and we have a few questions about the drawing. If we could get to those, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I can bring
the main one was adding color. Like, how do you add color to that? Do you use colored pencil? Do you use watercolor? Do you use graphite and watercolor on the same drawing?
So
and again, about a minute left. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So what I would recommend is, so if you have been drawing in a B pencil, and I'm going to bring myself back on here. If you've been drawing with a B pencil, you really do not want to add color to these drawings. The B pencil is very, very soft, and the drawing, what will happen is that the graphite will actually start to float and it will mix in with the drawing. If you want to put color on a drawing, you want to use all the exact same techniques that we talked about today. You want to draw exactly like I showed you, but you want to draw using an H pencil, a 2H or a 4H. Your drawing will be very, very light. It will come out like a beautiful silvery color, a beautiful, silvery values. The 2H has a lot of binder in it and a lot less graphite. And therefore, you'll be able to paint on top of it. You can paint watercolor on top of that. For colored pencil, I actually recommend that you don't color pencil on top of graphite. The binders in the two are somewhat different and they do not like to mix very well. Also, the graphite tends to muddy the pigment in the colored pencil. So if you do want to add color, I would say use watercolor on top of it, and then, but make sure that your drawing is in a very, very light graphite, that it's in like a 2H pencil. That in fact is kind of a classic 19th century approach to doing watercolor, is to doing the watercolor over the pencil drawing. So I hope that helps.
Most definitely, yes. 100% helps. Yeah, I think that this has been an amazing class. So many people are getting so much out of it. They really appreciate your bringing in the basics and sort of revisiting the shading concepts and everything. So thank you so much for your time today. It has been an amazing, amazing workshop.